Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Lee Chambers. Lee is a celebrated psychologist and well-being consultant, as well as a radio host and entrepreneur. In fact, at just 25, he won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. As a champion of menopause awareness and education, Lee has been called the Trojan horse of menopause. In this episode, he opens up about triumph in the face of adversity and how men can approach menopause with sensitivity and curiosity. Lee, lovely to meet you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on today, Hattie. So I'm Lee Chambers. I'm a psychologist and wellbeing consultant. I run a company called Essentialise, and we focus on workplace wellbeing and inclusion. We do strategy and we do training, and it's been a long journey to get into this particular career. I've been through some challenges myself in terms of my own health that have really ignited this journey. Worked in a few different industries, which have given me learnings, understandings, but also a bigger vision of what can be achieved. And also for myself, I've run a business previously, which has really highlighted the need for a wider and deeper understanding of well-being across other SMEs as well. So bringing all that in together has helped me to get to a point where I'm able to use my experience, some of my knowledge and some of my insights to be able to really help companies start to see how they can do well-being strategically, how they can make it impactful and effective, how they can measure it, and how they can embed it across different communities that they have within their teams, their workforce, and how it can be such a competitive advantage for organisations if they do it properly.
So were your health issues what channeled you into where you are now, essentially?
Yeah, in a big way. So to just give a bit of context to that, I had some significant mental health challenges at university. They led to me dropping out and spending a year at home trying to effectively work on myself and get to a place of balance again. I actually managed to return to university and graduate and find a place of triumph in that adversity. But then that took me on a bit of a journey. 6 years later, unfortunately, my immune system failed, and that led to me losing the ability to walk and then having to relearn again. And for me, that journey obviously forced me to stop and reflect in a lot of ways. It was a particularly challenging time with my son, 18 months old, and my wife, 6 months pregnant, and me losing that ability to support them and be independent and end up relying on them to support me in such a pivotal time. But it did mean that my daughter was born on my recovery journey as I was learning to walk, and she played a significant factor in me, getting through those difficult days, having a vision of taking her first steps with her and making sure that I stayed consistent and, did everything I could to get back on my feet. And sometimes you'll do more for other people than you do for yourself. And all those different aspects have come together to really make me passionate about empowering other people when it comes to health, when it comes to well-being, and when it comes to, making choices that can really enable them to achieve more, do more, and feel better about how they feel.
I've got goosebumps from that, just imagining you walking with your daughter at the same time. That's an amazing story and serves to highlight exactly how important feeling well, and being able to function is at home and at work in everything that you do. What led you to be such a passionate campaigner for menopause?
Yeah, so what's interesting, Hattie, is I often get asked this question, and there's usually an expectation of some big story, some big life event where I've been significantly impacted, and that's kind of ignited my passion and made me, somewhat of a male ally and somewhat of an ambassador, especially within the workplace. But actually, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. For me, it's about looking, and it's become something that's increasingly come into my eye line in my work. So obviously 5 years ago, there was very, very few discussions about this, very little awareness, and it was still very stigmatized, still very taboo, and still let's close the door and a few people speak about it outside of the public eye. Obviously, if I look at the impact I'm looking to achieve through my work, it's about getting all genders to be able to speak more openly, more vulnerably about what they're going through, And what I started to see in the businesses that I, help and assist to deliver effective well-being, to build those strategies, is that a lack of understanding around the menopause has caused a lack of conversation, which has then caused a lack of awareness and a lack of opportunities for education, especially for men. And because men don't have a reference point to understand a cyclical monthly hormonal journey, or anything that starts and ends within a lifetime, men struggle to really get their heads around it. So often it actually is a barrier to gender parity at board level. It's a barrier to senior women being able to continue to be effective. Lots of senior women have had to climb over a lot of barriers and obstacles to get to where they are today.
And that's if they've stayed in their workplace.
Exactly. So a lot of those barriers quite often, cause them to have to course correct, cause them to have to sidestep, sometimes have to step out. And if they've even managed to get there, by getting there, they've honed wide, defined, really rare and talented skill sets. Because that's what happens when you face so much resistance against a system that's not designed to accommodate and, assist you in making those steps. What I started to see is, firstly, businesses are losing incredibly talented females from the workforce at points of pregnancy, at points of menopause, at numerous different touch points over a woman's life, because there's not the support there, there's not the understanding. As I've come across my research, came across a figure, to replace a talented woman in your workforce, it can cost up to 213% of her salary. It's a lot of money it's costing, when actually what most women say is a little bit of support would have meant the world. A little bit of understanding would have made a massive difference. And even just being able to speak a little bit more freely about how I felt would make me feel like I was validated, like I was appreciated. And then on the flip side, I do stuff around employee facilitation, getting to understand what challenges employees face. And when I've had women who I admire, women who I think are pretty amazing, tell me, just lost all my confidence. I feel like I can't sleep. I'm struggling to function. I'm forgetting people's names, clients' names that I've worked with for years, and it's making me feel embarrassed. And then on the other side, my doctor thought I had depression. I've been on antidepressant medication for a year, and it's not depression. I've been misdiagnosed. Women say, I started to think I had early onset dementia. And it's just hearing these stories about how women have really suffered because of a lack of support, a lack of understanding, but more than anything, someone just considering what it might be. Because then you hear, I was ended up being put on performance management, I've ended up in disciplinaries, I've ended up losing my job. And all because no one really cares. And that's what kind of touched me. And that was my moment, as I started to build up the bank of stories and the bank of businesses not really seeming to get their head around it. I thought, I have to go in there, be honest and speak about it. And the biggest thing for me, Hattie, is as a young whippersnapper of a lad, as someone put it a few weeks ago, I actually got referred to as the Trojan horse of menopause, because they're not expecting it from me, but also no all senior male board can ever say to me, oh, she's mourning about the menopause again. So I am, in some ways, a bit of a disruptor. I'm willing to bring that conversation into situations and just to give men a bit of space to think about what they can do, and about the fact that it directly impacts 51% of the population of this planet, and it indirectly impacts everybody. So why are we not looking to address the challenges and really start to get conversations going so it becomes something we can speak about more freely, and support be more accessible and understanding just be there?
You are a very welcome disruptor, and if you're able to get the attention of the all-men board, who maybe find it uncomfortable to have conversations, or maybe through some cultural background are just unwilling to look in that direction, then carry on doing what you're doing. Yes, please.
Yeah.
How do we encourage people, because it's not just men and it's not just cis women, to discuss this more freely, more comfortably? How do we encourage them to feel comfortable having a conversation? If there isn't an open channel, an open corridor for conversation, then we're at a non-starter to begin with.
Yeah, from my perspective, Hattie, obviously we kind of look at the wider person perspective, and it does feed into understanding around different areas of lesser privilege, and that be sexuality, race, and obviously the trans community suffer an awful lot of abuse and invalidation. And this is just something that's applied on top of that for many of them, unfortunately. But the wider perspective, and I suppose my kind of view on it, is that it does need to be considered as part of that wider wellbeing strategy. But secondly, in terms of normalising those conversations, it actually quite often starts with leadership, an openness to be curious. And I've seen more men in my kind of millennial age bracket start to be more curious about things that don't directly impact them, as they started to question the systemic structures that are in place that disable people from being able to achieve the potential. But so often those conversations start internally, with people being able to start to share some of their lived experience. It starts with really equipping managers and leaders to start to have some of those conversations. And it's almost getting away from the fact that it should be a difficult conversation, because the truthful honesty is it shouldn't be difficult.
Yeah.
This is something that's, it's integral to human beings. When we can start to actually look and realise that this has been stigmatised, but things are starting to open up. And normalisation of conversation comes so often from igniting that curiosity, making people a little bit more aware. And again, when people are a bit more aware, they start to see the little things, the subtle changes in people they work with every single day. And that again just helps them to potentially be able to assist those who are not even sure themselves. Now, those conversations are obviously something that is, you can't go, because I've had men say, oh, so if I think Jane in HR, she kind of fits some of these criteria and symptoms that you're talking about. Should I go and ask her if she's got menopause? And I'm like, well, no. We start from a place of curiosity. We really start from a place of looking to see how we can support people, especially if they appear to be struggling. And you create that, psychologically safe space for people to speak. And, everyone should, we hope, within an organisation have that place to start that conversation. But it needs to be facilitated so it can start to spread, so it can start to touch people who are not directly impacted. And so often within an organisation, even smaller ones, there are people who are actually going through this at home, personally, with partners or with parents they might be caring for, or even for some members of the workforce, their own children. As people start to work to an older age as well, we start to see how that plays a different part in the segmentation of who might be affected in your world. But more people then really are able or feel comfortable to speak about at the minute are being impacted by it. And so often the men's conversation starts with a man coming out and talking about his experience. Literally, somebody being open and honest gives people permission to speak. When that's someone who you might actually relate to, it becomes even more powerful. So those discussions are built around facilitating those spaces, around giving people a platform to talk about it, but also the support that comes with that as well. The biggest thing is it's an educational piece for everyone, because everyone is still understanding. And because it manifests differently in every single person it impacts, we actually start to see that a little bit of education goes a long way, because it ignites the curiosity to how it might be impacting differing groups of people.
When you're experiencing something that might be difficult, if you open up in a very gentle way to somebody perhaps that you work with or that you know, that instantly gives them permission to connect and share their experience. Sometimes finding that connection can be delicate to navigate, particularly when it comes to something that is still personal, menopause, mental health. But the minute you offer that line, it gives the other person the opportunity to grab onto it. What is your involvement in Menopause X?
For me, it's being part of that ignition. I do have a background in video games and tech, so obviously with Menopause X being focused on data, I'm really starting to understand the economic cost of the menopause and really starting to dig deeper into that to create an even more compelling business case and a compelling case for governments, for basically the wider perspective to look at strategies to actually be able to see and quantify as well as qualify reasons to take significant action quickly. My part is really focused on, firstly, being an ambassador around the male allyship, around being a voice, but also looking deep at the products that will be created from it and starting to see how it can become something that makes a significant difference, both creating that case, really bringing data and understanding across the differing sectors of industry and the world at large, but also being able to do and create a lot of action, because it's great to have the insights. The insights will empower significant action, and that's kind of where I sit, looking at how that data connects to action and how we can actually start to cultivate that future of making sure that support is available, really highlighting the gaps and how solutions can be created to ensure that there's more encompassing support. Because at the minute, if I'm brutally honest, there's not much specialist support. Just being able to help businesses start to see what they can do. Basically, making sure it embeds, making sure it's not just an event, making sure it's not just a few courses and then we leave it, but making sure that it actually embeds into a strategy so organizations continue to evolve and continue to use the increased understanding to benefit the groups of employees impacted. It's a very interesting body that's being created, and I'm very passionate about being part of it.
It is fascinating. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. You touched on the trans community earlier. What can we do in particular to support them? And I know this is broad brushstroke, but they have a hard enough time as it is in many instances. So if you are trans and experiencing menopause, I can't even imagine the levels of struggle that you go through. What can we do in addition to opening up conversation to support and show that we care?
Yeah, and I think that comes from a significant place of those working, especially within the greater community, to realise that we should not play areas of lesser privilege against each other. One is not more important than the other. And in fact, many people sit across numerous intersections of lesser privilege, and being able to not silo ourselves in this is our fight, this is what we've got to achieve. All other causes are minimal or less important. And, from me and my perspective, it's really important that we actually start to look and understand that for some people, they will face an awful lot of challenges because, for many trans people, their identity has been suppressed. Who you actually are has been denied, has been invalidated, it's been illegal. And the amount of trauma and minority stress from that it's off the scale, really. It's really, really hard for people to conceptualize what that actually feels like. And the lived experience is something that's quite unique in itself. The wider picture is to really start to look at the challenges that they face, as not just in terms of menopause, but in terms of the wider kind of gendered health debate, so to speak, because they are judged at a number of points on that health journey. That is something that if you are cis, you never face. You never wonder how you're going to be judged by the healthcare professionals that you meet. You never worry or fear that you can't access services because of how people are going to perceive you. Really, it's about opening up those conversations to ensure that we look as gender inclusively as we possibly can within this community, to ensure that those spaces are created, and within businesses themselves, those spaces are created and people are able to feel more comfortable in having those discussions, because again, it's helping people to understand anything around around areas of intersection is a process, isn't it? There's a lot of bias, there's a lot of stereotypes, there's a lot of just stuff that people have got in the backpack from when they were younger, things that the parents said, things that the peers said, things that were out, out publicly years ago when there wasn't an understanding of how impactful and hurtful these things were. It's very much a case of looking at this particular debate and ensuring it's gender inclusive, which means that we have to, watch the language that we use and be mindful and try to make it more inclusive. That's something that I'm still in the process of learning and unraveling, because we have to be more receptive and understanding of the differing groups that are impacted by this, but also impacted by discrimination and underrepresentation in itself. So for me, it's about opening those spaces so that an education around those different areas also comes with the education around menopause.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a woman's issue, like it's so often touted. It's everyone's issue. It's actually something that is inclusively impactful to every human on the planet, no matter how you identify.
From a lived experience point of view, the hormonal side of menopause is, scientifically, that's the challenging part. From a hormonal point of view, for a trans man, for example, taking estrogen might have huge psychological impacts, which, as a cis woman, it wouldn't really occur to me. So there is another facet to menopause for the trans community that I feel we need to educate ourselves on. I guess, do you know what? It probably comes all the way back down, as it always does, to educating ourselves about other people's experiences, about their perceptions, and relearning. I'm actually quite reassured that you're still learning as well. The learning, the education is going to be where it's at. Do you have any inspiring stories from any of your colleagues or the people that you've met with regards to menopause?
Yeah, so I think that so often what happens is when there is a little bit of support there, that just creates such a ripple in that individual, and it then impacts other people. So some of the companies that I've seen really do it well. They've created a few of those ripples, and those ripples have come together to create waves of change within the organisation and open up topics of different challenges, and had people start to explore lived experience across a range of difficulties that they face. Obviously, seeing and speaking to people who they just felt listened to, appreciated, and heard for the first time, and that has made them feel valued. It's actually, in a lot of the time, empowered them to take additional steps to seek that support. It's helped them to feel more validated, to go back to the GP and push for what they feel will be beneficial for them. And it's so often allowed them to feel more empowered in their own health. But even back to the men on this journey, they've started to become more receptive to their own health. And a big thing that I'm kind of passionate and advocate is that starting to talk about the menopause, actually, when you take men into that psychologically safe space and start to talk to it about them, they start to open up, they start to become vulnerable, they will cry, and they will start to recognize just how important women are in their lives. You get them into that place and you help them understand just how the menopause might be affecting people around them. When they come out of that, they do take action. But one of the side effects, which is a positive, is that they actually become more receptive to seeking support themselves. So the biggest thing I've seen is we do and have challenges around male mental health, but actually using the menopause as a vehicle really supports them to start to think about what are people going through that I'm not going through. I've got a place of gratitude for that. But actually, I need to think about the things that I've not been doing. My leg's been hurting for a week and I've not got it checked out. I've not been expressing my emotions very healthily, and I've got things that are weighing down. And all of a sudden, it actually gives them permission, scope, a place to start to speak about that as well. By creating these places of expression around health, it actually benefits everybody. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've taken away from this, is that we actually need to speak about people's health, to actually look at some of the gendered health challenges and open up those conversations. One of the other things, Hattie, is that speaking about the menopause, also opens up conversations around other gendered health challenges. So it starts to open up areas around being able to speak more easily about perimenopause, around things like endometriosis and PCOS. And it actually starts to create more of a space to talk around some of the fertility and pregnancy challenges that women and people go through that, again, are stigmatized and difficult to approach in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And by starting to widen that, it will hopefully start to at least create a shift in the health inequity we have within this country and within the wider world. For me, it's, like I said, a continual learning journey. I'm meeting people every day who are going through different challenges, and it's being expressed in a different way. But there feels like there's an increasing connectiveness to make a significant difference and to just start to turn it from something that it wasn't that long ago that we couldn't speak about. Last week, I spoke in front of a room of 160 people from differing businesses. And I kind of think 5 years ago, it would have been in a little closed off room to 10 people just having a bit of a chat. So it's coming, but we need to make sure that with that kind of wave of momentum comes lasting embedded change. It's about sustaining the development going forward and helping businesses to understand how they can support people, but more than anything, helping people to understand how they can be more aware, more supportive, and just be able to really become menopause champions themselves.
Lee, that is wonderful. Thank you very, very much indeed. Is there any one piece of advice that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice would be, I don't think it's the place of people going through the menopause to be the educators of what it is, because everyone's different lived experience. They can so often be the catalyst with you hearing them and making you think. But like anything, and like we just said previously, it's about being curious. Be curious, go and do a little bit of education. Just understand, and you will then be empowered to share that with other people and set off their curiosity. We don't need to be an expert. We don't need to be a specialist. There are lots of people who are qualified and understand and have been doing that. But we can all make a small part of a wider collective who do stand for change and who start to, build those structures of the future. My simple advice is just be curious and incite curiosity in the people around you.
Thank you very much indeed. And all the women in your life are very fortunate to have you around, as are the rest of us, to have a menopause Trojan horse.
Have a lovely week.
You too.
Bye
Take care. Bye. You can find Lee at essentialize.co.uk. Subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on the podcast apps so that you never miss an episode. And please remember to spread the word. Leave a review as it helps us keep this podcast going and boosts our ratings. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.